Welcome to episode 26 of the Football Truth podcast. I'm happy to be back with my friend, Matt Cooper.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So what's been new in the last, I think it's been like a year and a half?
Has it been that long?
Almost 2 years maybe?
Oh, man, something like that. What's been new? Since the last time we've talked, I've just been trying to add to the bag, on the training, biomechanics side of things, even some sensory elements, and then same thing on the nutrition side of things, just trying to get a better understanding of that. Been working with folks both in person in the SoCal area and then online as well.
So I understand that you work mostly with basketball players and fighters. What is one of the most common issues that you see with a new client that comes to you, and it's one of the first things that you need to fix?
Yeah, I would say also not soccer, football, but American football would be up there too. I do work with Gen Pop folks and kind of all over, but those are the main ones. I think the main thing that I've been working on and posting about a lot is just sort of like general structural alignments, and so your center of mass being pushed forward, right? And things like how your rib cage and pelvis tend to be kind of aligned or misaligned essentially, and then how that might affect someone's day-to-day movement or their performance on the court or field. So I would say that's kind of like a big thing that we didn't really talk about last time that I think is like pretty fundamental, and a lot of like downstream compensations, whether it's the foot or whatever, can emanate out from there,
And in terms of structure, like with myself, with soccer clients, or even just working with top level pros that have all these trainers, even the idea of structure is kind of something that is not interesting.
Yeah.
Just want to talk about muscle size, like numbers on the barbell, like plate numbers.
Right.
How do you kind of explain the importance of structure and alignment?
Yeah, sometimes it's not always easy to get buy-in from folks. I'll just be real, because there's a little bit of like turning someone into a PhD client that has to happen for them to appreciate these things. But just on a baseline level, I try to tell people like, look, if you can't control your center of mass just against gravity, like not in motion dynamically, not in motion statically, then you're going to have trouble doing that dynamically as well, right? And then there's also certain ways in which your like bones can be aligned, like your hip joints, things like that, that could change your body's ability to produce or accept force, right? So like Taylor and I were talking before the show went online, that like basically some people are more likely to produce force off one foot, absorb force more into one hip, things like that. And basically there are things you could do to correct that, again, not to make yourself fully like aligned, but just to kind of give yourself a little bit more degrees of freedom. So number one, you don't get hurt. And so number two, it can make the scouting report a little bit harder. If you can actually get access a little bit more foot pronation and kind of like IR, internal rotation on that right side, it might be easier to kind of go both ways, if you will, right? Or if I can kind of help you get a little more heel reference, either in general or on that left side, I can help you kind of stop and absorb force better.
So that would also be very similar to soccer players, when obviously like they're very one-footed and they're always used to having the IR and the XR going one way, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, big time. Sometimes you can even create a compensation through how you live or train for your sport. So I would imagine with soccer, with kicking, you're kind of like doing that a lot on one side.
Yeah, and in my experience with clients, because obviously you plant with one foot so much and you kick with you kick with the other foot so much that usually the ankle of that plant foot is so much stronger versus the other foot, just in terms of like basic like force absorption and landing.
Yeah.
But then the leg that is the stronger leg that has better coordination usually has better like upstream connection out of the glutes. And so it creates that pattern where it's like plant, kick, plant, kick.
I could totally see that. You probably like all the way up through like some of the core musculature and fascia too, on like differentials there. Baseball pitching, I would say, probably another good example, or a fighter punching.
So I think this is a good time to bring up the idea that the body is not supposed to be perfectly symmetrical.
Right.
Right. And I think in mainstream sports, like average trainers, like random physios, there is still that belief system that the body is like a robot, and we're like supposed to be exactly perfect And can you help guys understand why exactly that maybe isn't the best paradigm?
Yeah, yeah, because if that's your paradigm, you're only going to really do a lot of like same side to side kind of
Yeah,
bilateral like work, like a traditional back squat or
yeah,
whatever it is. And I think even the mainstream is starting to realize like you go into your average gym and you say, oh, like you have a butt wink. Like, yeah, I kind of shift to my right on a squat.
yeah.
So even your average person can kind of pick up some of these things. Uh, so I think that with people like that, you kind of can like that can be your inroad, and then after that, I think why that can be, as far as your question, why it can be problematic, you can reinforce those compensations even worse if you're not doing something to address them through training, right? Again, not every compensation is bad. It's just context, right? Like if I'm working with an NFL lineman, I probably don't care that he has an inability to rotate too much, just as long as he's not in pain, right? I kind of only care about addressing compensations like that just to the extent that it's not affecting someone's like day to day. Beyond that, though, I don't really care that he can't rotate, because if he can rotate too well, the quarterback's getting sacked. Where if that's you or me, it's the exact opposite. Like I would look at stiff, like immobility, like in your thorax as like a problem, right? It's for sure soccer, for sure day to day, for sure basketball, and we might be doing a lot of stuff to correct that. And then there could be asymmetries there too, right? Like whether it's like an inability to kind of like breathe properly, whether it's an inability to absorb force on one side if you're an athlete quite as well. Um, I just think that you're never going to be perfect asymmetry wise. However, you want to give someone enough as a practitioner degrees of freedom to where they're A, not going to get hurt, most importantly, God forbid, and then B, you can make the scouting report a little bit harder if someone all of a sudden can create force off one leg just as well or similarly well to the other.
So basically, increasing their vocabulary of movement, just making them more adaptable, which is kind of like the main the main thing of being athletic, right?
Yeah, it's
Being
expanding that
adaptable.
100%. Yeah, expanding that movement vocab, expanding movement literacy, and not just for the point of it,
Yeah,
not for novelty's sake,
yeah,
like some
yeah,
of the movement
exactly.
gurus, but yeah, exactly. Like basketball is real easy to see because you'll see a lot of guys like they only do like things like a punch drag or a snatch or a crossover like into one hip
Yeah,
a lot of the time, some of these guys, or at least like way less efficiently. And it's okay to have tendencies and preferences, but maybe that guy'd be harder to guard and less likely to get hurt if he could do the same into that other side, right? So anyways, once you understand some of the biomechanical reasons why, you'll start to understand, okay, this isn't purely just a motor skill thing. It's not just because he dribbles with, this hand preferentially or whatever, right? So another word for it too, you could say is ambikinetic, like ambidextrous.
yeah.
You're never going to be fully ambikinetic and use both sides the same way, but maybe shortening the gap could be beneficial to an extent for some.
On a side note, it's funny that you mentioned some of the movement gurus because like when I was coming up, I think like early on I saw like different guys like doing like parkour,
Yeah.
going through like a tree and like jumping around and like doing like bear crawls for hours. And it's like it's nice for like a very like small dose
Yeah.
because you get like some like initial benefit from that from like a low investment
Yeah.
perspective. But then in reality, it's like you kind of go farther down that pipe,
Yeah.
and you're like, well, this isn't making me like sprint better. It's not
No.
making me shoot or kick or dribble or dunk better.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's it's one of those things where like if you just want to do it for play or fun, feel free. I would never tell someone to like not do something they like. But as far as it being productive for sport, I think it's a different convo, different
Yeah.
story.
Context.
Yeah, exactly. Context matters. If parkour is your thing, by all means. But yeah, now you have a lot of like movement variability for movement variability's sake kind of gurus, or um, methods over principles type
Yeah.
gurus, right? Where they might do what I call mindless mobility. So they're doing like they're on the
Exactly.
ground and they're
Yeah.
doing some of the like not the 90-90 bridge, which can be useful, but the 90-90 like hip folds over and
Yeah.
over,
Yeah.
and a lot of the like movement stripped of its context. It's not that all that is bad, isolated movement, but a lot of times it's kind of mindless mobility.
That's a really good point because I've always tried to help guys understand that like more isn't better,
Hmm.
especially when you're operating from a false paradigm of thinking that more hip mobility is better because it's more, as
Yeah,
opposed to being better.
yeah,
So that's one area that I find a lot with like my clients, guys that play soccer and football, is they just they think if they do more of something, then it's better because they're doing more of something.
Yeah.
But without any relation to a larger map of sprinting, biomechanics, skill.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when it comes to, if you want to talk range of motion too, like more mobility is better. Like I would say, like if you look at like yogis, they're going to have like
The
maxed
best.
out in that category, and they have a lot of joint laxity. So they interrupt your length tension relationships. A bodybuilder is going to be stiff and on the exact opposite end of that spectrum, like a power lifter. Ideally, what you can do is have enough, if you're an athlete, enough mobility and like length and tension kind of combined to securely like rebound into a certain position, and then absorb that force or accept that force and redirect it coming out of that specific joint angle. So Bill Hartman, Dr. Pat Davidson have like in their models various like ways to describe this. Dr. Pat talks about like basically things like the propulsion arc, and then also how like in as far as like joint ranges of motion, if I'm trying to go for like hypertrophy or muscle growth, then yeah, I probably want to resist and go full range of motion on a lot of things. But if I'm doing something for sport, let's say it's like a vertical jump, and then I'm trying to come up with some sort of split squat, lunge, squat variation, he's like, I probably only want to go into the that strong angle or that corresponding angle with that joint security that I need to be able to rebound back out of, like in the game or sport. There's also a certain element of like, if we're doing it plyometrically, I don't want to resist it on the way down. I'm intentionally yielding into it and then rebounding back out of it. So it's just context.
Yeah. And again, I think a second point on context that's really important, for example, is when land athletes are taught to work on their barbell back squat or their deadlift. And obviously, to improve that, one of the main things is, can you brace your core?
Yeah.
Can you keep your spine stiff? Because
Right.
that's helpful for the movement itself.
Yeah.
And like protects your body from damage
Right.
from the weight.
Right.
But then we don't consider, is that beneficial for sprinting, for running, for shooting?
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. And I'm of the belief you can probably dose in some of that stuff. I mean, I never barbell back squat anybody, but like you could do, I try to come up with like squat or split squat variations or a hinge variation that might correspond to sport better. Like there's one that I'll post a lot, which is kind of more of a frontal plane dominant, like kickstand hinge, where you're like loading into one hip and getting out of that. So like that I think has an element of like not only getting your like the benefits from some of the output based stuff, like something with a lot of load, but also it has an element of like coordination where you're lighting up some of the same tissue sets and things like that that might correspond to sport. Yeah, I just think that like you could probably like dose in a little bit of that stuff as long as you're doing a lot of the more three-dimensional stuff that reinforces good movement hygiene outside of that. But there's a lot of sports that like would never need to do like a sagittal plane bilateral foot side by side deadlift, and they'll be plenty strong enough. We were having this combo in the gym the other day, and one of my quarterbacks was like, "Oh, like coach, can I bench today?" I'm like, "Yeah, you're gonna bench. You're just not doing what they're doing." And he's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, and I was like, "Well, this is a good opportunity to say, like, I'm not anti like weightlifting or all traditional weightlifting. Like, their linemen, they're gonna do barbell bench. They need that, like, or some variation of that, right? Like, you're gonna do something that's more like push pull and like some sort of alternating version of that, because your whole sport is dependent upon torque. I'm sure he could do push-ups and some sort of, sagittal bilateral stuff, but I don't want him to go too far down that pipeline. Otherwise, it's going to interrupt his ability to throw.
Yeah, exactly. Bless you. And it's a really important point to reinforce, because so many athletes just forget what's important for their sport and kind of get like they lose sight of the forest for the trees, and they kind of become like a grinder. And it's like, oh, if one day I finally master the deadlift, then somehow that will convert into me becoming a world-class football player.
Yeah, no. I don't think so. So I think what's interesting too, a place that we didn't talk about last time that I've like landed on since then, just hearing more people talk about this now, like Dr. Pat Davidson, Tim Riley, Chris Chase with the Memphis Grizzlies, is like I've kind of landed on a place where a lot of my, not every athlete, again, not like NFL linemen, stuff like that, but like a basketball player, some of the athletes we're talking about, a lot of my free weight stuff is probably going to be more orthopedically friendly. It's probably going to be stuff that reinforces like solid movement, right? You know, so if I was doing a freestanding hinge, it's probably going to be that like kickstand hinge type thing where I'm like loading into one hip and coming out.
Yeah.
I could even demo if you want. But like if I really want someone to go purely for just output and that's the goal, load is the goal, I think machines can actually be useful in some of those cases because they can safely load the target tissues
Yeah.
without reinforcing as much negative compensation. I'll give you an example, right? If I have someone on like some sort of pendulum squat machine, the machine is providing ground or external support and the right angles and puts them in the right position for success to load the target tissues. Whereas if I had them barbell back squat, there's a good chance that like they're going to use their low back, they might use their knee.
Yeah.
If they do it enough, they might get their pelvis like because it's like because of the stress of the load, they might reform their pelvis to be more like stuck in extension city, like some of these power lifters.
Yeah.
And so my whole thing is like if I'm going to be doing free weights, it probably should get reinforce good movement, solid movement hygiene. Yes, there are exceptions. And then if I want someone purely to go for load and that kind of thing, and they're not like an NFL lineman type situation, I think machines can be helpful, right? Because then you're just loading the target tissue and maybe getting some benefit there without as much potential for repositioning a joint in a negative capacity, right? So I think that like a lot of us, me included, a lot of us like more functionally oriented coaches threw the baby out with the bathwater a little bit with some of the machine stuff where like I don't see there being anything wrong with, dosing in like a hamstring curl machine or things like that here and there just to kind of improve tissue quality, strength, you know?
Would you use that more with someone that's coming back from an injury versus someone that's like looking for uh,
Someone that's like fully healthy kind of thing, looking for
uh,
performance.
like injury versus a performance? Yeah.
It just depends. If I'm working with someone for performance and I think they have like sincere kind of like strength deficits that need addressing,
Yeah.
then I might still do that too because like there's a lot of research to show that like eccentric training, not like a barbell back squat eccentric training, but maybe like just enough of that to create enough like joint and tissue stiffness.
Yeah.
It can help support dynamic movement like plyometrics and agility and things like that. So I think I would do it with both. It probably would just the amount and the volume and the intensity and how much space it would occupy in the program probably would vary on the sport, how healthy they are. Because I do think that if you're not healthy, machines can be a really good like layup drill, if you will,
Yeah.
to just load some of the target tissue, and then eventually when they can tolerate body weight plus gravity, you can progress them to things like that.
Yeah. Everyone needs somewhere to start.
Everyone needs somewhere to start, yeah, and then you kind of have to do like a graded progression, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's like the crux of coaching.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's why you pay someone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Knowing what to deploy when,
When.
and where.
Yeah, because because also one of the things I find with let's say like high school players, college players, is there a bit obsessed with the idea of having access or having 1,000 exercises
Yeah,
to do, as if that by itself means that you'll get some kind of benefit.
right.
Whereas if you just have 5 exercises that are right for you at the place in your journey that you're at, and then you have the time and the coaching to master them correctly, you'll get far better results.
Yeah, and I think even then, like you can just take those same exercises, and there could be a slight variation.
Yeah,
Even
exactly.
once you do change them, it's not like you have to do a wholesale change every time. Sometimes it's just like a little bit of like a around the edges change, right?
Yeah,
Like someone who maybe needs to orient their center of mass back, or on one side needs to capture a little more heel reference,
yeah.
be able to like get a little bit more ability to decelerate. They might be doing a lot of like front foot elevated stuff. I think your average person needs maybe more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Just use a split squat variation, and they could get benefit out of that for a long time because on average, day to day living and your whatever compensations are coming into the whole situation with probably going to stick there for a while. But eventually, I might just take the same exercise literally and then make it all on flat ground once they
Yeah.
can manage that better. Or maybe if it's like a high level athlete and they maybe need more propulsion off like their right side, maybe we do rear foot elevated and the right foot is like on the ground. So you're kind of, even within that, it's like the changes are very small. It's not like you need this fancy, entirely new deck of exercises all the time.
Yeah, I think nowadays, especially with social media and YouTube, and athletes are seeing like thousands of videos about every different type of system. There's the trap
Yeah,
of novelty,
right,
of like every 6 weeks I'm gonna do a whole new system,
right.
and then jumping from this to that, or even trying 4 different systems at the same time,
Yeah,
and then blaming all of them, and then
right.
going to go to a new one, because I've seen that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. They're just doing too much,
Yeah.
Like that can for sure happen.
On the topic of center of mass, a, a good point that I would like to ask you about is, before you mentioned about your weight forward on the balls of the feet, going like forward locomotion.
Right.
Lots of athletes are told to obviously do deadlifts, back squat, front squat. I think one area in that conversation that people don't understand is the difference of where your center of mass is going when you back squat with the barbell versus when you're sprinting.
Yeah, 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 for sure. I don't know that there's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah,
I also think that like for center of mass, there's time and place for both, right?
yeah,
Like there's a lot of people like that are kind of all like forefoot type stuff. And I
yeah,
think that's got to be important for stuff like sprinting, jumping, all that kind of stuff, athletic work. It's going to be more forefoot driven.
yeah,
But in your day to day, like your average person's going to need to capture more heel reference because they're going to need that to like center themselves in a standing neutral.
yeah,
So
sure.
it's just kind of like time and place. If it's strength stuff, your average person's probably going to need a little more front foot elevation, a little more heel reference, stuff like that,
Mm,
load in front of them to orient that back. But then when it's time to go, sprinting, all that kind of stuff, then they need more like center of mass forward, like
yeah.
uh, stuff that reinforces good propulsion, right? So same thing, just knowing what to deploy when type thing.
Yeah, that's the thing that I see is guys that want to get faster when they're running, and then they want to max out their back squat. But
Yeah.
all of the weight distribution of the back squat is going in the heels,
Yeah.
and there's nothing going forward into the forefoot on the balls of the feet. And that topic itself is kind of like foreign to most athletes that I see.
Yeah.
They don't get that that's different.
It's different. And I think that you see either extreme. I think you see some guys where they do all heels down work
Mm.
and they don't do any like enough stuff that maybe reinforces like setting for example, when you're on the balls of your foot, it sets off a totally different muscle firing pattern. So when you
Yeah,
see us on the
exactly.
discs or some of that stuff or some of the Marmarinovich stuff, it's like you need to do some of that stuff to reinforce those same bony alignments and muscle firing patterns that come with that to then support your athletic work, uh, on the court or field or whatever. At the same time, you also need some time for heels down work just to kind of get your center of mass back, be able to control your center of mass, and
Mm.
not get stuck one way or the other.
Yeah, of course.
You want to have, this is a case where you do want to have movement options, right? Unless again, you're on one extreme, like a power lifter or something like that.
Mhm. I think a really important thing that I see with soccer players, and I want to see if you see this with basketball guys and fighters, where their coach, well, like more so for the basketball guys, but where their coach tells them that they're weak,
Yeah.
quote unquote, and then the only logical conclusion is to just go and do typical like bodybuilding stuff in the gym to get strong.
Yeah.
So can you guys go more into the idea of strength
hmm
and what it actually means for a basketball player or for a soccer player?
Yeah. I mean, there's like strength from like a tissue tolerance standpoint. Like, do I have the right, like, just enough stiffness to be able to withstand some of the athletic stuff? There's strength from like a will this and reinforce explosiveness and power that'll
Mhm.
carry over to sport. Um, Again, I'm not anti some of that stuff, right? Like we talked about a second ago, like, but I think a guy like a Michael Jordan or a Kobe, when they did it and it helped their game, there was a lot of machines involved. and there wasn't a lot of heavy barbell back squatting that like reposition their hips in a
Yeah.
negative capacity over time. We're also missing the most fundamental component, and that's they were already both pretty damn good movers
Yeah,
before doing that stuff,
exactly.
right? So they were layering some of that stuff on top of an already really good movement foundation.
Mm.
I think a lot of people have kind of a dog shit movement foundation now. And so what you're doing in the gym probably needs to reinforce that a bit more
Mhm.
than using those guys as an example and say, oh, see, they were good, they were great, and they got even greater by doing that. It's like you might find some athletes like that, but the amount that will have that same sort of transformation by doing the same kind of just traditional strength work is probably pretty slim. Like
Fat chance.
I don't want to throw baby out with the bathwater, maybe some of that stuff, but like for that to be your entire approach, I don't think it's going to really go so well for hoopers or football players of whether it's American football or soccer.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like for myself, I'll get so many players that they see a video of Ronaldo in the gym doing some random gym work,
Yeah,
and then they'll say, "Okay, well then that is the solution for me."
yeah,
But they don't have the underlying movement efficiency. They don't have any of the biomechanics that he has.
right.
So then there's a huge disconnect of what it takes to get to that level.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think that like we can learn from the outliers in some ways,
Mhm.
but we also can't, right? Like some of these guys, like some of the stuff Ronaldo's doing now. I mean, it's similar, not entirely because he's towards the like closer to the end, at the end, but I think it's more similar to the Kobe and Jordan situation. He
Yeah,
was
of
already a really good mover and a really good
course.
athlete. So whatever he does now is not going to matter as much as what he did when he was on the come up and in his childhood and all that kind of stuff. Um, Not to say I would throw out anything and everything he does, but I don't think it's helpful to look at someone and say, "Oh, they're doing this, I should do it." Right? Like
Yeah.
LeBron is a good example too. Some of the training he does, I think, is good, but like some of the exercise variations I've seen, I don't think is very good at all.
Mhm.
But that being said, the way he's like takes care of his body by spending millions on like maybe some of the recovery stuff and food and things like that. I'm not saying all of it's useful, but you know, probably helps manage even some of the training not being great. And some of these dudes like LeBron are just genetic freaks, right? Whether it's shitty diet, not in his case, but whether it's like super shitty diet or some of this other stuff, it's like sometimes athletes' superpower is their ability to overcome bad physiological inputs and keep on going, right? Like Jordan was famous for not always sleeping very well. Like
Mhm.
you have your average person do that, and then they'll be screwed.
That's why they're there in the first place.
Yeah, but
Like they
yeah,
got there because they had the ability to,
yeah,
to to overcome.
right. Not just athletically, but like physiologically too.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, sometimes it can be helpful to learn from those guys, but a lot of times not. So, and I think your average person doesn't have the discernment, or your average athlete doesn't have the discernment to know when that is, right? Like Victor Wembanyama on the
Yeah.
Spurs, he like goes to bed early every night and he shuts off his blue light, at a
Yeah.
certain time. Like that'd be an example of like, yeah, learn from that because that's something that probably could benefit everybody,
Yeah. Yeah.
but like some of these guys will like say, oh, DK Metcalf in the NFL, he eats whatever he wants and not even that much protein and he's huge. And it's like,
But you're
okay,
not Metcalf.
yeah, you go try that and you see how it works for you, right? Like
Yeah.
same thing when I get sent some of these like I have one client who always sends me like once in a while you'll see like a ripped, shredded vegan CrossFit athlete or something like that. And it's like I tell him you you want to go on probability, not possibility, right?
Yeah.
Because is it possible? Yeah. It's also possible for an alligator to have 5 legs, but on average, does that happen? No. Right. So you go do the vegan diet or whatever it is, you go do the junk food diet and see if you get those results, across the population, it's not going to happen. If it happens, it's going to be 1 in a million kind of thing. Right. And it might even be one of these folks that is so genetically and physiologically equipped, it would be harder to get them to crack, if you will.
Do you find that guys like that who are super gifted, when you get them into the gym or uh, do some training with them, that they'll get better doing anything,
Yeah, maybe not literally anything, but like, yeah, they
almost
can get better
anything?
doing like, yeah, a lot of shit. Whereas you have to be more specialized with someone who's not those guys,
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
know? So I think that's where like there's kind of a disconnect sometimes when you're working with student athletes or even sometimes higher level athletes where they see other guys doing that and getting results, and it's like, you're not that guy, so.
Yeah, I've had guys that were professional players reach out to me and ask me about higher level pro players and say, "Oh, but he's in the gym," and I'm like, "Well, he's also like 1 in a million athlete.
Yeah,
So you should focus on becoming a top level athlete, not just copying what he does in the gym, which is just like some pull ups and some and like random stuff."
yeah, yeah, exactly. And again, I think I usually will, like, again, it's about having discernment. We'll sort through some of that stuff and say, all right,
Sure.
yeah, I wouldn't barbell back squat like he is. Here's maybe a variation of something you can do.
Yeah.
Chin up, pretty innocuous if you do it right. Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine. Like, whatever. Depending on the athlete, maybe not for a thrower, but you know, doing that is not going to also transform the type of guy you're talking about too. You know what I mean? It's like it, they need something catered to them, and I don't mean in like a hyper sport specific way, but catered to them in like this is where you're at
Yeah.
athletically. This is where
Uh-huh.
he's at athletically. You know, this is his natural genetics. These are yours. Like, you got to just fit the training to the person, right?
Context.
Yeah.
Let's see. On another topic of like stretching,
Mm.
what do you think about like flexibility? Because I know like I don't think as much in basketball and like American sports, but in the in the world of soccer across the world, the idea of like stretching is something that personally I really don't see much like science behind.
Mm.
Like I'm sure there is like something somewhere, but it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Every team wants you to stretch like before and after. And me personally, I don't. I find there's much better ways to deal with tightness or soreness than stretching. What do
Right.
you what do you say about this?
It probably depends on the stretch, but in general, I think
Yeah.
what is the stretching really doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it promoting more mobility in a joint? Not if I'm just doing stuff like this, like,
Yeah.
but when it does go well in science or in some outcomes, is it because I added a little bit of a sensory awareness or a neuromuscular connection there, and maybe it helps me activate it in the game? Maybe, but I wouldn't need stretching for that. I could probably do that way more like efficiently and targeted by doing, I don't want to say mobility drills because that word doesn't mean anything anymore, but the right kind of like maybe tissue recruitment drills, movement prep drills.
Mm.
Um, if I am going to do some kind of mobility, something that balances out the right, ideally replicates kind of a pattern or a firing pattern that's going to correlate or like to the sport better, but also just like have the right length tension relationships. I think
Mm.
on average, when you're doing a stretch, right, there should be some level of tension, requisite tension there too, not just joint laxity, right?
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
don't think that's going to be very useful. It's going to not result in you having an ability to absorb force like that. I will say now and then you'll find a stretch where someone is so restricted that just the stretch itself provides enough tension and length balance to maybe capture some benefit.
Mm.
But I think on average, yeah, just mindless, passive stretching is
Mm.
not it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because in my opinion, and on my like, research, when a muscle is tight, it more has to do with the nervous system as opposed to the local tissue.
Yeah.
And I think in a large part, athletes don't put that together
No.
because if you just try to pull on this tight like muscle fibers, they don't ask why it's tight in the first place.
Right.
And so then from there, like you can start to investigate
Yeah.
and go deeper and deeper and deeper, and which I assume is what you do, obviously, and what I do, and actually
Yeah.
try and help the underlying root cause.
Yeah.
Because that also goes back to like the gym stuff, like watching videos of Ronaldo where they want this thing and they just look at the symptoms
Right.
and they don't kind of think, okay, what got him there
Right.
and why did his hamstring get tight?
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the origin story of it,
Yeah,
and it's not, I think it's seldom just, oh, he just, get a little bit stronger, like,
yeah.
needed to be a little more, like, flexible, like, usually there's kind of it could be those things, but usually there's a little more to it,
Mhm.
at least in my experience.
Of course. What's like the latest thing that you're into, Matt? As far as like biomechanics, strength, speed, like what new like system are you working on right now?
Yeah, on the training end,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's like the training and nutrition too, I feel like I'm still uncovering more and more layers of like how to progress. I guess you'd call it PRI, but it's
Yeah.
really people who've taken that and progressed it further. People like Dr. Pat Davidson, for example,
Mm,
Bill Hartman, people like that. I'm like on the athletic dynamic side of things, like Matt McGinnis, people like that. Pretty interesting to me. And I think that I'm kind of just doing what I've always done, which is like I'll always go back to these old systems and see what I can learn from them, but I'll like take what I think is the best and maybe discard what I don't. I'm not going to say I'm perfect, but I do my best to keep it principle based and slot in everything under that. I kind of take a rethinking the big patterns way of structuring and organizing training
mhm,
and then kind of like bucketing these things under that. I would say something I've found really helpful just to give people like something a little more tangible is like I've found a lot of the stuff Dr. Pat says to be helpful as far as how to structure workouts. So you might
mhm,
have what he would call control patterns,
mhm,
and you could probably bucket certain like accessory mobility stuff in there if it's relevant. But this
mhm,
would be something where you would take a motor pattern that corresponds to whatever sport you're working in, and let's say the frontal plane, right, for change of direction stuff, horizontal force management,
mhm,
and you would do like a super slow. And the goal would be to recruit the right sets of tissues and key off the right joint actions that then correspond to whatever motor pattern you want to superimpose on top of that, right? So let's just use that frontal plane as an example. I might stand in front of a cable machine and maybe I have a roller between my legs, or if I might have a slant board under my like left, whatever side I'm shifting into,
yeah,
and I might do a row with this arm and either a press or have a mobility stick and reach. And then I'm pronating off this foot. I'm kind of internally rotating this leg as I access this side. There's other cues too. I don't want to like, say that's it. But
of
long
course.
story short, it would be something like that where it's helping me control my center of mass in
Mhm,
whatever corresponding plane, in this case, being able to lateralize my center of mass.
mhm,
And again, via some of those same joint actions I might see in like a cut or something like that. And also with the right sort of choreographed breathing pattern. So I'm probably doing more exhalation because exhalation feeds rotation.
mhm,
And then on top of that, I might superimpose something, whether it's after that control pattern, a resistance pattern. So maybe some sort of like frontal plane driven hinge or squat where I'm like loading into that hip, and or an athletic pattern where maybe we're doing some lateral change of direction stuff, right? So I think that's a really helpful way to structure training.
mhm,
And to your point, use the gym in a way that's maybe more meaningful too, right? It's like that, like if I am, if I have my way, I'm maybe having someone do an entire like horizontal force management day or days, maybe like a more vertical displacement day, things like that. Maybe if it's relevant to them, like a rotational day that we might couple with some upper body or full body kind of stuff. So um, I've been really into doing that and then putting it on the applied side and
mhm,
seeing how it works. And so far, the results have been really good. I feel like you can kind of teach aspects of movement and clean up movement pretty well that way. I also think that if you look at other systems, it's always interesting when they arrive at the same conclusion
mhm,
using different methodics, right?
mhm,
Even if they're not always the best ones, right? So functional patterns, for example, they'll do a lot of these super slows that they don't post, and then they'll do a dynamic action that corresponds to that super slow sometimes, right?
and they'll post that one though.
And they'll post the dynamic one. That's
Yeah, yeah,
why you'll see a lot of that online, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
but not a lot of the former. So there's like a kind of a more PRI type way of arriving at that conclusion that's a little more structured, organized, I think, whether or not the methods are better or worse aside. And then FP, similar thing. Even in like some of the Jay Schroeder kind of stuff, he would start with ISOs and he would always say
mhm,
position first, and then he would layer things on top of that. So I think that to me, that's where you can say, oh, that's a principle. I should reinforce good positional hygiene, key off the right joint actions, coordinative aspects, maybe
mhm,
like sensory awareness, all that kind of stuff, and then go into whatever strength work or dynamic work that like corresponds to that. So that's something I've kind of taken as a principle, and then it helps me bucket in. Oh, that's when I deploy this thing from FP or this thing from traditional stuff or Goda or whatever it is. Like I look at Goda, similar thing, like context, right? It's like, oh, when I want to restore maybe some good like propulsion with bless you, good propulsion with integrity, I might do their kind of stuff. With the right cues.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Getting us like some of that relative hip ER, IR. But I probably don't want to do like purely just their stuff, or I'm going to reinforce people's uh, compensations and tendencies to breathe with their neck or walk with their neck.
Yeah.
Walk with their back, kind of thing.
I think you bring up a good point of systems having like a blueprint or a map of sorts of like what is optimal. But then the question is how do you get there?
Yeah.
In my time, like going into Goda, for example, I thought that the map or the idea of how a human should move optimally made sense, and it wasn't really anything too like new for me, in my opinion, because some other principles they took from other guys before them. But then the system of training of how to get there, I was like, well, I think doing 1,000 reps, trying to force the body into this position, is a bit different than going under the skin and saying, okay, why is the nervous system afraid to adopt that like movement strategy?
Yeah. 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 Or what? How has someone lived?
Yeah.
How are they maybe born? How have they lived? How have they trained in a way that creates layers of compensation that maybe reposition joints the same way too? Um, yeah. And I'm with you on that. I think with Goda too, if you look at what they do, they've even changed it a bit because they were like making people develop like these banana feet,
Yeah.
high arches,
Yeah.
feet that over supinate, you're more likely to sprain an ankle. So
Yeah.
now you'll hear them say, "Oh no, anchor with the big toe," right? Which is kind of similar to like PRI, which is where
Sure.
like some of those folks will say anchor with the big toe and heel,
Uh-huh.
so you're not bowing your hips open and kind of flaring your lumbar and doing all the stuff you're going to do if you do too much Goda, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even even within that stuff, you can find use. Sometimes it's just sort of like reformatted.
Yeah, kind of like some basic movements, and then find your own way to twist it and adopt it to something that makes more sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I've done similar. I think there's some things in Goda like Seiza and like some basic positions that are like very bland, let's say,
Hmm.
and you can kind of just use it as like a blank page and make some adjustments based on the athlete. But then going a bit more in depth into some of the Goda stuff, I just didn't find any benefit because you're just doing thousands of reps and you're not changing anything in the nervous system.
Yeah,
But I also found it a bit ironic because I think most of the results they get are with guys that are already top athletes,
mm,
and their like nervous system is so adaptable and like ready to learn that you feed them a few positions and then it's really fast.
yeah,
So then those guys benefit really easily because they're already top athletes and they just need to feel a bit more like a bit more IR, or just like a bit, their hips a bit farther back behind the rib cage, and
yeah,
like some just like very like small adjustments that they feel great results because they're already at that top level. And obviously 1%, 1% at that level is a huge change
yeah,
versus someone who's lower.
yeah. And I think I like and deploy like a lot of their stuff, getting like hip ER, IR,
Yeah.
stuff like that. I just think if you only do that, or if you do too much of that stuff with your average person, the average person has their center of mass pushed too far forward. All
Uh,
Goda's stuff is literally about that,
yeah.
which is great for some of these sports where they're restoring propulsion with maybe a little more structural and coordinative integrity. Um, but I think if that's all you feed someone, you're going to kind of reinforce that center of mass pushed forward. It's going to be harder to decelerate for one, and
Hmm.
then for two, if it's an everyday person, they're more likely to breathe with their neck, walk with their neck, walk with their back, type of thing.
Hmm.
So you just kind of further send that center of mass forward. It's probably not helpful for your average person. So
Hmm.
it's just what to deploy when, and
Hmm.
how much of it too.
Yeah, context.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a question that you wish I asked you on this podcast?
Maybe more, maybe one or two nutrition ones. I think we talked a little bit more about that last time.
Well,
I
talk to
think
me.
training
Yeah.
we did pretty good.
Well, so why don't you have your clients eat raw eggs?
How do you know? It's funny if my
True, true. I'm not sure. Maybe you do.
if my girl was seeing this now and then, she would make fun of me because now and then if I like we're in a pinch and I need some protein, I might like do a little like OJ and eggs raw
Oh,
just because I
perfect.
like
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, I'm like I know this restaurant's gonna have it's fancy, so it'll have bird food. Like I need to eat, so
Exactly.
getting what I need to get in. So
Yeah.
uh, I'm not opposed to it if someone wants to.
Sure.
It's more just what do they want to do, you know?
Do you think there's a difference nu- of the actual nutrient availability if an egg is cooked like if it's hard boiled, fried, over easy, raw?
Just eggs or kind of food in general?
Well, food in general, but like in this context, I mean, eggs, for example, it's obvious because eggs are made in so many different fashions,
Yeah,
and in my opinion, I mean, like heat does change the chemical structure of a food.
yeah.
So, do you think that actually goes into okay, a raw egg ha- a raw egg has more nutrients than like a fully like scrambled egg?
Yeah, I guess the broader question for some food, really you can only access nutrients if you cook it. Like kale, I probably would never touch
Exactly.
unless it was like really heavily cooked, and then
Yeah,
I could get some of the like good stuff out of it and
yeah.
like avoid some of the
In a stew
unwanted
or something.
aspects.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are some even yes, like potatoes, stuff like that. Like
Sure,
there's some
sure.
foods that I think are more useful if you cook them. Uh, with eggs, I haven't looked enough into the research to say like definitively, but like it makes intuitive sense that like cooking it might cook out some of the nutrients.
Sure.
I don't think it would be enough. Like I think like a microwave might be problematic. Like might mess up some nutrient availability a little bit more so. Um, but I don't think it would cook out like black, white, all of them type thing.
Sure.
Um, I do think if there's a food that I think is safe to eat raw on average, assuming it's clean and the shell isn't cracked, it's
Of
probably going to
course.
be an egg, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
other than the obvious stuff like fruits and things like that.
Yeah. How about meat?
Meat,
Yeah.
actually know like a lot of people like this guy, Josh Raynergold, who like he just eats like raw grass fed organic ground beef sometimes and
Yeah.
does really well with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I've always been a big and still am a big sushi guy.
Of course.
So I haven't done it with like beef and raw like red meat so much, but
Mm.
I think it's big in Lebanon, right? Or some
Yeah.
countries they do
Uh,
raw like red meats, not just like fish and stuff, and people seem to do fine with it. Probably a lot has to do on the safety side with how it's kept, how it's prepared, all that kind of stuff. There's probably got to be more consideration there.
Yeah, if you look across the world, like almost every cuisine has some form of raw meat or raw fish, and especially if you go to any fancy restaurant, like one of the main things is they're gonna have beef tartare, carpaccio,
Yeah,
some kind of raw meat dish. In Lebanon, yeah, of course, like raw meat is a big thing there. Also, like I think in America, we obviously in America, like the foods that we're exposed to is a bit more uh, condensed
yeah,
because like it's not obviously it's not authentic
yeah,
to these foreign countries. But like for example, in Ethiopia, they have like tons of raw meat dishes where you just eat it
yeah.
like that. But in Lebanon, there's different versions. But the main version is they pound the meat till it's very 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 soft,
Pause.
and then and then you combine it like a few ingredients and you enjoy the meat like that.
Yeah, yeah. I think I saw a video of you having some. Yeah, see, that would be something I would for sure try. I would for sure check that out.
Yeah, it tastes great.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm open to it
yeah.
certainly.
I've been doing raw meat for like 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah, so you've been on that for a while. I
Yeah.
remember.
The thing is, like, the only times I ever get sick is when I have like some cheap cooked meat at some really, let's say like a fast food type place. I've
Yeah,
never gotten sick from any kind of raw meat, any kind of raw egg, any kind of raw milk.
yeah. No, yeah, raw milk for sure. I mean, that's
Yeah,
I don't do raw milk now because I don't need the extra calories from fat,
sure.
but on a health level, yeah, it's
Yeah,
great. I mean, the only reason there were ever sick like NAS highly like what do they call it?
pasteurized. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean now like if you look at hospital visits for raw milk and things, it's like so minute and things.
Hmm.
I mean, you're there's way like more things that we have day to day that like
Yeah,
outpace that by like hundreds of thousands every single year. But raw milk initially made some folks sick because it was like pre truck refrigeration.
sure, sure.
And like when it was carted around, it was refrigerated. There was less sanitation and processing hygiene policies with how it was made. Um, yeah, totally different story than what we're in now.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone can agree on if the animal is sick and diseased, it's probably going to be a problem.
Yeah, yeah, and there was also, yeah, speaking of that, there wasn't like the same level of standardization and scrutiny there.
Yeah,
They were pulling milk from maybe cows that weren't as healthy.
yeah.
So
And then nowadays it's a flip where it's like there's cows that have injections,
yeah,
hormones, corn fed, all these things that maybe you would you'd argue that is not natural for
yeah,
cows and thus affects the quality and the safety
right,
of the milk and thus to pasteurize it is safer
yeah,
because the
exactly.
milk itself is not healthy in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I would say
Yeah,
for sure. I think your average person, if someone who's like really healthy and robust, should be able
yeah,
to tolerate the pasteurization. That being said, I think that the most nutrient dense is going to be like a raw milk or a
yeah,
goat's milk or something like that.
yeah.
You know,
I agree. Matt, is there anything that you want to leave us with? Any like gems of wisdom?
huh? Training specific, life specific. What you want?
Tell me.
Tell me. Uh, I think, I think I would invite people to kind of like look at their life and like identify where there's friction
Mm,
and try to restore flow. I think a lot of restoring health. There's a guy Nate Lawrence talks about this, but a lot of like bioenergetic health
yeah,
nutrition, it's about the removal of friction and the restoring of flow, whether
yeah,
it's like a gut thing or whatever. And I think life works that way too. I think that if there's parts of your life that are like things you've been procrastinating on,
yeah.
or
True.
maybe you're overwhelmed, then know you need to address this area or that area or this small habit you need to just start doing. I always invite people to kind of like just not leave any sort of like back burners on in your life. I think if you kind of just attack that sort of avoidance behavior, a lot of good things flow from that. You know?
That's a very good point. I think people do they wait to make tough decisions, and then
Yeah,
it gets worse. And
yeah,
in the meantime, it creates other issues in their health. And
yeah, yeah. Or even just small things like being diligent about like I'm going to be communicative. I'm going to get back to people on a business level. I'm
yeah,
going to go to sleep at the right time. Most days like just simple stuff like that. I feel like has a domino effect. You could take it in any way you want. Life, business, um,
yeah,
health.
yeah. I find that some people they like to pretend that they're busy and wait to respond to messages about like whatever. But pe- people that people that I've interacted with that are like multimillionaires and like billionaires respond very fast
Yeah,
if it's important to them.
if it's important to them. Yeah, if it's important, they do. And if they don't know the answer, they respond fast, but they'll let you know, hey, I'm still getting this sorted,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
I won't know till this day, or whatever. But yeah, I think people are too avoidant when it comes to that kind of shit.
yeah. Not confident enough to be a professional and just respond and say, okay, I'm not sure right now, but I'll get back to you.
Right. It's a form of respect at the end of the day.
Yeah. Matt, thank you so much for coming on. It's my pleasure, and I
Appreciate it,
really,
bro. Thanks for having me on again.
yeah, it's absolute
Couldn't
pleasure.
say no to the beach too.
All right, guys. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon. Cheers.